Imagine facing 384 years of prison. That was Bryan Dawson. Listen in for his story from tragedy to triumph and how he became the CEO of 1819 News.
Welcome into this week's edition of Alabama Unfiltered. I'm one of your hosts, Scott Beeson. Allison Sinclair is with me. Amy Beth Shaver is out today. Allison, where is Amy Beth? I'm not worried about
This is Amy Beth.
She's looking rough. the contract on the makeup.
The former Miss Alabama,
through.
right?
Yes, yeah.
Right here.
She put on a little weight. And,
Beauty pageant queen.
Yeah,
rough.
well,
Wait,
you
I
know,
don't know
I'm
what-
eating my feelings.
there you go.
Yeah.
We haven't even introduced him yet. But first, let me tell everybody,
Okay.
this podcast is powered by 1819 News. Go to 1819news.com, sign up for the Daily Detail and the Daily Newsletter, and you can find this podcast at all your favorite places. Give us a thumbs up, 5 stars. We're everywhere you can find a podcast. Let's bring our special guest in, Bryan Dawson, who is the CEO and founder of 1819news.com. Apparently, we were scraping the bottom of the bowl.
That's it.
This week. Who can we get? Allison was going crazy. Who can we get? Who can we get? Finally, somebody. I think it was you.
Yeah.
Let's get Bryan. Let's get Bryan. Let's get
Default
the head,
to Bryan.
Let's get the head of the head of the company in here.
But nobody knows
He has nothing
Bryan
to do.
is like,
He's bored. Let's just use up another part of his day.
Ooh,
I tried to tell the ladies that, and they were like, "Oh no, he has nothing."
That's
He's-
right.
he loves this.
I do. This is a good time. There's lots of laughs, and I need more laughs in my life, so here I am.
Well, what people don't know is that there's like, no offense.
That's almost as good.
Yeah,
as
that's
with
like,
all due
it's like,
respect.
yeah, it's in the Geneva Convention. Now I can say whatever I want.
Right.
Like, you are so smart. There's so much in that brain.
I'm blushing. Under
I don't
my
know if
beard
you
right
would
now.
know
should.
it.
That's- yeah.
Like we need to sit down. Like, I feel like, and just let you tell us all the things.
What
All
I
the
don't
things.
get is why she says that about you, and then I never hear her say like, "Oh,
Well, she
Scott
doesn't
is
say it
so
in public.
smart."
She has complimented
She does-
you.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and
Once
she's
or
an
twice?
engineer, and so her standards for smart are pretty high.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because you're in that category.
I guess
It's
so.
only
true.
because he's been in prison
That's
that
correct.
he's so smart.
And
actually,
and we're,
no, I'm
and we're
so
afraid of
serious.
him because
Like,
he's an ex-con.
So the funny part is when people ask where I go to school, I'm like, well, I spent some time at Yale. Oh, that was jail. So then I went to Penn State. No, that was the state Penn. Yeah, I got that backwards too. I don't know what's going
So
on.
good. And it's all true.
It's all true.
Do you want to give us like a 5-minute version of your life and how
I don't know if it's possible, but I'm happy to give you a rundown, and we'll see if it takes 5 minutes.
probably should do a
So where are you
whole
from to start with?
podcast?
Where are you from?
Where are you from?
Where are you from?
Are you from
Where
around here?
From around here. Sorry, no. I be from Colorado Springs is where I was born. I spent a lot of time in Colorado Springs. I spent some time in Germany. My mom joined the Army, and grew up the latter years of my childhood, teenage years, whatever you call it, in Wichita, Kansas, and actually a little town south of Wichita called Derby, Kansas.
So is that how you learned how to talk right?
That's
'Cause, I mean,
correct.
you speak pretty Southern.
Yeah. No, that's just I've been here for like 8 years.
Well,
And it
it
happens.
takes some people longer than that, though.
does.
It's
really
learning curve.
were meant
Now, I
to
will
be
say
from the
my
South.
dad was born in Gloucester, Mississippi, raised in West Monroe. So,
Okay,
I mean,
okay.
I is Southern.
So you got some of that. It's in the blood.
No, it's there.
All right, all right. And he taught you how to speak.
That's correct.
Okay.
And what foods were good and what not.
I get it. Because
Yeah.
you do fit in.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you.
I didn't.
The beard.
The beard in the prison.
I also beard, prison. I like to deer hunt, eat boiled peanuts, drink sweet tea. It's a match made in heaven.
Yeah, good deal.
Yeah. So, the short version. So, when I was 23 years old, I was facing 384 years in prison for attempted murder, aggravated robbery. What was the other one? Extortion.
There's some drugs in there.
There was drugs in there. It was all drug related. But where I was sitting in the El Paso County Criminal Justice Center, which is the county jail in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And I was facing 384 years. And so how that works is it's 32 years for one of those. And because they were violent, they stacked them. And because that was my 6th felony, anything over 4, it's called the habitual criminal. And so they multiply it by 4.
So in Colorado, instead of 3 strikes you're out, it's 4 strikes you're out?
Well, so they have a 3 strikes you're out, and I just blew past that.
Okay,
Seriously, yeah.
well, you gotta have standards.
That actually happened.
The fences are short on this field.
Left 3 in the dust, and then ended up with 4. And so they took 32 times 3 because it was 3 violent crimes, 32, 32, 32. And then they multiplied it by 4 because it was a 4-time habitual criminal.
Okay.
And so that left me facing 384 years if I didn't take a plea bargain. And so
you'd be pretty old when you get out.
yeah.
Why don't we just say until you die?
More years than our country is old.
Right.
Right. And so it's a daunting thing. They come to you with a massive amount of years so that you'll take a plea bargain, because if you don't take a plea bargain, you go to trial, because our Constitution guarantees you a trial of your peers. And so if you go to trial, and if everyone went to trial, the whole system would shut down, because there's more people in the system than there is available, than there is system. And then it's also expensive to do trials and things like that. And so if you know that you're dead to rights and you didn't do it, the way they do that is they come and they say, well, if you go to trial and lose, you get big, huge sentence.
Right.
But if you don't want to go to trial, we'll give you this smaller than big, huge sentence. Right. And so that's their way of kind of, getting people through the system and into it. And so, but how I got there. So I, as I said, was born in Colorado Springs, Colorado. My parents got divorced when I was 2 years old. I believe the only reason they got married was because my mom got pregnant with me. They couldn't be more different. My dad being from, grew up in West Monroe, Louisiana. My mom was born in Kansas, but grew up in Colorado. My grandfather was a state senator in Colorado.
Okay.
And so my mom, the daughter of a state senator, my dad, the redneck,
right.
And that's where you get me. It's a
You're
pretty
the perfect mix.
Perfect mix of that. So yeah, that was it. And courts gave me to my mom. That was just kind of how it was done then. And so from 2 to 10, I lived with my mom. My mom wasn't super stable at that point in her life. She loved me. She did everything she could. But she didn't have a lot of things. She kind of had a troubled upbringing and stuff as well. So, but 0. So I guess 2 to 10 was very rough. I call those formative years, and I always equate it to growing tomatoes. In order for tomatoes, you equate like children, you want your children to bear fruit. And if you're growing tomatoes, you want big, fat, juicy, healthy tomatoes. And in order to get big, fat, juicy, healthy tomatoes, you have to have certain elements, right? So this tomato plant needs this much sunshine. It needs this much shade. It needs this kind of nutrients. It needs this fertilizer. It needs this. And so
kids are water at the right time.
Exactly. And so kids are the very same. They're very much the same way. And so in those formative years, I lacked a lot of those nutrients that I would have needed to become, a fruitful child, and what I was left with was a lot of anger and resentment and hatred and low self-esteem. Not to get all Freudian and Jungian, but I lacked self-esteem big time, and I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. When I was 10, I got in a big fight with my mom and was able to convince her to let me move in with my dad, and that was in Wichita, Kansas. One of the parts of the story I always tell because it comes full circle. I moved in Kansas with my dad in Wichita. Then we moved to Derby. And I was always the kid in middle school and high school that got put in the friend zone. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. The high man. He was such a ladies' man. He's like, yeah, I don't know what that is.
No idea what you're talking about.
I don't know what that is.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I do. I am very acquainted with the friend zone. And so because I lacked self-confidence and had low self-esteem, my interactions with the opposite sex led me to being given the Heisman. Like, hey, you want to be my girlfriend?
Right.
And so,
Allison
don't awe
did that
me.
to all kinds of people.
Yeah,
you
she
can
did.
tell just by the oh. Right, I don't know. I never did that to anybody.
It's terrible.
Poor guy.
So,
She slides both ways.
the first time it happened, I was an 8th grade graduate. I was in 8th grade. I asked this beautiful, incredible girl to 8th grade graduation dance. Really, I asked my friend to ask her friend to ask her because that's how it's done.
Right.
She said yes, apparently through that line of communication, and we met and went to 8th grade graduation dance together. Afterwards, I professed my undying love to her, and
Right.
I just want to be friends.
You might have overdone it.
Yeah,
maybe.
probably a little soon. Could have waited, but I didn't. So anyway, that was me. That was my interactions with women because of the low self-esteem. This will come full circle. Promise.
I was wondering
how
this is going to get
where,
you.
Where are we going? Yeah, where are we getting? So
that happens to most people, regular people.
Well,
from what I hear.
No, but
except
this comes
you
back
because you're Rico Suave apparently.
It's the hair.
Right.
It's the wings.
It's the cowlicks.
So anyway, and because of that, I had, again, like that was like compounding self-esteem issues with the rejection, right? And then So I just wasn't comfortable in my own skin. But when I began to drink, I was comfortable in my own skin. And so I started to drink and drank a lot. And then I got to be 16, got my driver's license, scanned it, made a fake ID.
Right.
Now I'm the life of the party. I can get everybody, drinks.
Right.
And
Did
that
you
was
have
the
a
thing.
full beard then too?
Not quite. I was working on it.
Okay.
Yeah. So
That would help.
feels weird.
Now,
like
were
I'm
you
talking
like
to
the, were
Scott.
you like
and
the
then
funny guy?
No, I
I mean, were you like the?
Yeah, I was a class clown, big
You're the
time.
class
I
clown guy.
won
Right.
an award for class clown or
Okay.
whatever. They didn't call it that. It was
You
more
play sports?
distinguished. I did. I was very good at sports.
Okay.
That was baseball and football was my jam, and so I ended up being kind of the party liaison, if you will. I was the life of the party.
that didn't get you any girls.
That did not. Apparently, I
You were
was
a
so
lineman.
drunk all the
Dang.
time. No, I was actually a fullback and a tight end and a defensive end.
What?
I ran
Wait,
I ran a
fullback,
4.8
tight
40,
end?
had a 28-inch vertical. I was a beast.
And you couldn't find
Wait, we
any
need to
girls?
see baby
Hey, man.
Bryan pictures.
Baby
And,
Bryan.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
that's,
you'll
That
meet my
is
kids,
weird.
and it's
Okay.
oh, look, Baby Bryan.
okay.
So where was I? You
Live at the party.
Sorry.
rudely interrupted.
Buying
You
all the
were
drinks.
buying
Rudely
everybody
interrupted.
drinks.
Supplying
So
the
I was
beers.
drinking,
I'm
all
adding
those
color.
things. And then, but in that, like the only time I ever felt comfortable in my own skin is when I was drinking. And so as I drank, that became a habitual thing. And I would drink to the point of blacking out on a pretty regular basis. And then I started smoking weed, and then I started doing cocaine and those things. And I eventually got into it with my dad. And he said, you know, in the beginning of my senior year, you need to quit football and go move with your mom in Colorado, or you can quit football and go to rehab. And so I quit football and went and moved in with my mom in Colorado. Started getting into selling drugs there. And this is the very, very short version. You can go somewhere and find my story. I know we did it with Joey Clark on the radio. Right. That's somewhere on our website. Also did it on the This Alabama Life podcast. But the short version is I moved up through the ranks of selling drugs in Colorado rather quickly. Started selling weed, then I started selling coke, then I started doing meth and selling meth, and just exploded to the point where I was pushing drugs for cartels in Colorado Springs.
Right.
And it was basically the stuff that you see in movies, right? It was crazy. And then
Like Ozark.
I've not seen Ozark.
Oh,
I know.
A lot of
saw a
money.
picture.
No, it was less about the money for me. You know, the people I was working with had tons of money and tons of drugs and all that other stuff. To me, it was about the lifestyle and just the party lifestyle and always being able to, be high or do whatever. And
Did you find your place? Like, was it a? But you can't be well supported.
Were you in the
But it
family?
gave you
I mean, was it?
significance.
no, I mean, so what you guys don't understand is like drug lifestyle is literally like you wake up just to go get more drugs and sell more drugs and do more drugs and buy more drugs and get
Okay.
more, and thing. And that's really, that was the pursuit of that life. And that's all it was. It's really a form of idolatry when you look back on it kind of through a biblical lens. And that was me, and that was my life. And I pursued that and got really, really good at that. The same things that make me good at what I do for a living now, as far as being able to, sell, network, those type of things, made me good at that. And one of the things that a lot of, higher ranking people that push drugs in the area, one of the things they liked about me is that if I said I was going to do something, I did it. I was reliable. I showed up on time. And so even as a drug addict, I still had these certain qualities that made me
You were a
reliable.
dang good employee.
Yeah,
exactly.
you're the
And
best.
so, and I'm a white guy that got them into a clientele that they couldn't easily reach, right? Being looking like this. So there was that, and that all basically came to a head. Some of my drug connections got arrested, and so I went into doing some other things, and I was involved in stealing motorcycles and things like that. And a guy got caught with one of them, and then told on me, and then it went on like a chain of all these areas where we had stolen motorcycles and stuff. Everything got caught, got busted. I got arrested. I was in county jail, and they give you what's called a discovery, which is basically all the evidence that the state has against you. Right. And it tells you all the people that told on you. And I'm like,
Oh,
whoa. So I bonded out, and I went after these people. And one of the guys that told on me, I went in, went to his house, knocked on the door. He opened the door. I went in there and beat him nearly to death. And that's where the attempted murder, extortion, aggravated robbery came from.
Right.
And I got arrested for that, got charged with that, bonded out again. And that's where all the felonies came from, is I would get arrested, bond out, catch a case, get arrested, get probation, catch a case, get arrested, bond out, catch a case. And I just kept doing that over and over and over again. And so I did that. And then I bonded out, and I kind of calmed down after that. But I also knew that I wasn't going to be going to my court date. I had made up my mind about that.
Right.
So I bond out, and I'm like, I'm gone. And the plan was to go to California and then down to Mexico. Never made it. Nothing ever worked out. Apparently because I was high. I like that song.
Okay.
Because I was high. Anyway, so that didn't work out, but I was in this safe house in Colorado Springs, and leading up to the safe house, I had gotten away numerous times from the cops, like where they were like on me and I somehow got away, got away.
Tied in.
And so I ended up being like one of the most wanted criminals in Colorado Springs. And they had finally found me. Someone told them about the safe house that I was staying in. And right in that neighborhood, they had, what would you call them? Basically like stops set up to where they're stopping cars, you know, and showing them pictures of me like, hey, have you seen him?
Oh,
He's
my
armed. He has
goodness.
drugs.
Really?
He's this.
That
oh, yeah.
is the movie.
There was a roadblock for you.
Yeah, well, a bunch of them in this whole neighborhood. Anywhere where I was known to be, they had it set up and they were doing that. And so they had like pictures with like an AK-47 on it. It's like, I never had an AK-47.
Right.
Like, you know, but they were just like trying to make me look super more nefarious
Right,
than
so
I
people
was.
would turn you in.
Yeah, exactly. He's very dangerous. Where is he?
And but my question, how did you get to be the one they're doing that? There had to be people meaner and rougher, higher up than
Maybe
you. Why
not.
were you? Maybe, or is that not the case? I mean, you were the bad guy.
One of them, yeah. I was,
Okay.
I had again, it's a weird thing. I'm not trying to brag about it because it wasn't a good thing, but that was who I was. So, yeah.
So they caught you.
They caught me. And so how they caught me was in kind of spectacular fashion. And so I'm in my safe house in the same neighborhood where they're putting up all these, you know, things, roadblocks. That's what they're
When
called.
you say safe house, what does that mean?
So I was
picture like where you drop
not-
off a baby.
No. It was an apartment on the third story. Literally in Colorado Springs. It was off of like Union and LaSalle was the crossroads, and there's an apartment building here and an apartment building here. I was in here. I was on the third story.
Right. This is the drug safe house.
Yes.
Okay.
It wasn't
safe house
a
for
drug
the
safe
bad
house. It was
guys.
it was a Brian's on the Run safe house.
Okay.
That's
so
what it
you're
was.
just calling
Yeah.
it safe house.
I'm just
This is
there.
where you were hiding out.
Yeah,
hiding
exactly.
out.
Oh, okay. I
And-
pictured you like, okay.
Yes.
I got it.
So I'm there, and I wake up, and it was weird things that you remember. I woke up, I'd smoked some weed, I was watching the Chappelle show, eating bratwurst. And I looked out the window. I know it's weird details. I looked out the window, and I saw. So I was in this building. There's a building here, and I saw the front end of a cop car, and I knew that the gig was up essentially,
Okay.
right at that
Right.
point. And so the gig is up. And so I had a retro recliner, like a 70s recliner that was in there. And that was about all there was. There was the TV on the floor. There was this retro recliner. I had like a little mattress laying on the floor and then the kind of kitchen stuff. And I took a nylon rappelling rope and tied it to the bottom of this retro recliner. And then like every 18 inches, I did a double knot to climb. And the recliner was wider than the window. Okay.
Okay. So we wouldn't come through.
Yeah. And so
So see,
The
I told you he
doors-
was so smart.
the doors are on the inside, right? So it's an apartment with inside doors, like in a hallway. And they don't know which apartment I'm in. And so I hear them, boom, 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 Colorado Springs police, open up, boom, kick the door in. And they're like 3 or 4 apartments down. And I'm like, okay, I've got time. I kick the screen out of the window, throw my bag out the
Sweating.
window, wrap the rope around my hand and just jump, right? And so I jump and I'm hanging from the third story window and I'm hanging like that. And what I didn't know is there was a surveillance van in the back because I looked to see if there's any cops out there and there was nothing.
Right.
And I'm hanging, and then all of a sudden, like 50 or 60 cops come swarming around either side of the apartment building. They weren't going to let me get away this time, right? And so I look up, there's cops above me. They're now in the apartment with guns drawn on me above my head. I look down, cops there's no tasers, it's all pistols, right? Cop dogs barking. I get on the ground. It's like,
You're
well,
like,
I don't know where else I'm going to go. Unwrap my hand, let go, and I fell, landed on the ground. They put their knee in my back, cuffed me, and put me in the back of the cop car, and that was June 19th of 2007. And it's weird things that you remember. Again, on that day, they were playing Rihanna Umbrella was the song that was on when I was in the back of the cop car driving off to the county jail. I
What
don't
happens when you hear that song today?
know. It sends me back. No, it doesn't
Do
really.
you,
I probably don't ever hear it, so I don't know what would
Can we
happen.
sing it?
This would be some kind of weird, psychological experiment to just play that when I'm somewhere and I start sweating and freaking out. So,
So they go through the process. They find you guilty. I
Yeah,
guess.
no.
You
So,
plea.
yeah, I
Plea.
pled. So I end up in county jail. And this is way longer than 5 minutes, but that's what I'm saying. You
This
can't
is
tell this
so
story in
good.
less than 5 minutes. So, I end up in county jail. I'm thinking I'm going to go do the rest of my life in prison. So I go in there, and you kind of got to be like, you got to make a name for yourself. I made a name for myself on the street. Now I'm in county jail and I'm fixing to go to prison. And so now I kind of got to make a name for myself again.
So that you'll survive in prison.
Exactly. Right. And so that you're respected and people know who you are and like you don't get messed with.
Are you consciously thinking
Oh,
this?
absolutely.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
you got to come in with a good reputation.
Yeah. You come in with a good reputation. You keep your word. You can fight. Like you can defend yourself. You're not a punk is kind of the terminology they use. And people can't just come and punk you and take your stuff, essentially, right? And so you want to have that reputation. And again, prison was nowhere near as bad as I had it in my mind because I hadn't been yet. I'd just been to county jail.
Okay.
And so I have that idea in my head, though. I'm got to be this bad dude. I got to be tough. And so I'm hanging out with these gangs and stuff in the county jail. And they're like, go beat this guy up. And I went and beat that dude up. Caught another case, an assault case when I'm in county jail. Mm-hmm. Went at the hole for a little bit. Went back to another unit. Got into another fight that someone said, hey, go beat that guy up. Went and beat that guy up really bad. Caught another assault case. And finally they put me in administrative segregation, which is you're removed from general, like they call it gen pop is general population. AdSeg is administrative segregation. It meant I was in a cell by myself and they weren't going to let me out of that cell except 1 hour a day. So I'm in there for 23 hours a day.
Right.
I get 1 hour out to take a shower, make a phone call, and then I'm back in that cell. And I was going to go to prison from that cell because they weren't going to let me back out in general population because of the assaults that I caught while I was in there.
Okay.
So in that process, I'm pacing in my jail cell. There's not a lot else to do.
Right.
There's laying,
right,
and there's pacing. Those were my.
You're not doing like in the movies, doing all the push-ups and the sit-ups.
No, that's it gets people did it. I couldn't stand it because like you get sweaty and then the room gets sweaty and then you're just like,
right. Then you're just in the wet.
Yeah, I couldn't do it. Now I had that hour out and you could go do work out and then go take a shower and then that was kind of my thing.
Right.
So I'm in there and I'm pacing and I have this epiphany and it was God hasn't saved me yet, but it was God kind of what I would call the effectual call. And it was God working on me. And what happened is I realized that this was my fault. And
what?
And that sounds real simple to us normal human beings that are responsible. But up until that point, I'd blamed my mom. It was my mom's fault. It was my dad's fault. It was the cop's fault. It was the judge's fault. It was the district attorney's fault. It was the system's fault.
I'm not sure us normal people always say it's our fault.
Yeah,
anyway.
that's true.
Maybe that was an epiphany. So who's praying for you in your family? Anybody?
For sure, my grandma on my dad's side, we call her Mamu. She's a incredible woman of God. And a funny story there, I mentioned this on one of my last podcasts, but my dad grew up in West Monroe, Louisiana. He grew up with Phil Robertson and all the guys at Duck Dynasty, right?
Okay.
And so
the beard.
Yeah, there it is. Great. And then my grandma, Mamu, taught Sunday school with Miss Kay for like 30 years. So I had a friend that actually went down to see Phil Robertson about something. And I said, well, tell him that your friend is Betty Dawson's grandson.
Okay.
And he tells him about her and the whole thing. And Phil Robertson just stops in his tracks and says, Betty Dawson is the most godly woman I've ever met in my life. Mm. And that's the person
strong.
that I had praying for me, right,
when
I'm in there. Yeah. And so her and many others, I'm sure my mom was, but by far the strongest Christian in my family at that time was definitely Mamu, for sure.
Right.
So, but I have this epiphany and I realized this is my fault. And the dot that I connected was if my bad choices created these bad circumstances, that means that if I make good choices, I can create good circumstances. And it was like this math equation. The meme with the lady with all the math equations like running across her face. Like that was essentially what was happening in my head. And it was the most liberating feeling in the world. I realized, wait a second.
Being a victim is not where it's at.
And I can choose to have a better life and I can do things. And I'm responsible for how I think, how I feel, and how I act. Right. That was the epiphany. Whoa. And so I began to make changes. They were slight changes. I mean, there's not a lot of changes you make in a cell, but it was enough to where my grandma took notice. And then, so they brought me my plea bargain. And the plea bargain they brought me was 32 years with a crime of violence. Okay. And so they were going to give me, I think, first degree assault. Maybe it was with a deadly weapon. I don't think it was. I think it was just first degree assault. And it was first degree assault, 32 years with a crime of violence sentence enhancer. This is the plea bargain you got to take. And you're going to trial tomorrow. And you can either take the 32 or you can get 384. I was wrecked. I went, called my grandma in tears. When you're 23 years old, there's not a big difference between 32 years and 384 years. Right. It's pretty much more than like you can bear. And so I just kind of let it all out. And she said, look, and up to this point, my family had cut me off, and they needed to. Right. They needed to. And so she's like, I can tell something's changed in you. She could sense, right? And this is Grandma Barb. This isn't Mamu. This is, and Grandma Barb's a huge, huge piece of my life and my story too. I grew up at her house for a good chunk of my childhood. Right. And so called her. She's like, I can tell something's changed. And she's like, I don't have a lot of money, but we're going to try and get you some kind of a lawyer, right? So that you don't have this public defender. And it wasn't just trying to defender was bad. Right, yeah. Right. I mean, but she's overwhelmed. Right. Yes. And so all these miracles happen. We're able to get the lawyer for an affordable price, and then get the lawyer to where he's retained and he's actually my attorney, all in a 24-hour period. And what happened is we went to court so that I was going to start trial or take my plea bargain that day. Mm-hmm. And we said, hey, he has a new attorney. Can we punt? And the judge said, no, you have to decide. Well, I'm like, man. And so I'm sitting there like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And one of the witnesses that was supposed to show up for my trial, if I went to trial that day, didn't show up. And so they had to kick it off 2 weeks. And in that 2 weeks, he was able to retain me, and he got me into what's called a mediation hearing, which is great for me because it's negotiating. Right. And it's basically a horse trading. So the district attorney's over here. I'm over here with my attorney, and there's a retired judge, Judge Toth, that would go back and forth.
From this negotiation. Separate rooms?
Yeah, separate rooms.
Yeah, I'm familiar with some of those.
This is your thing.
Yeah, negotiating. And I had a strong hand, too, because it was Martin Luther King Day. It was a holiday. We were never able to get our calendars synced up. And so they're like, well, let's just do it on Martin Luther King Day. So I see the district attorney. She's not the district attorney. She's one of the sub-district attorneys or whatever for the area. And she's in there in her pajamas. You know what I mean? It's snowing outside, and it's a holiday. And she doesn't want to be there. And I'm like, I got all day. I got like 384 years.
Right.
You know what I mean? Right. And so I took my time, was very slow, and, made sure it was like taking forever. And then finally, they came back 20 years. And then I said, well, I think I should only get 10 years. And they came back, and they came back to 15 years. And she said, look, you got 2 assault cases while you were in county jail. There's no way I'm dropping this crime of violence. And so I told my lawyer, I said, look, you go in there and tell her, don't tell the judge. I said, you walk in there and tell her that I don't want to end up in Lyman, which is one of the bad prisons in Colorado. I don't want to end up in Lyman with swastikas all over my face. I want to change my life. I need an opportunity to change my life. Right. Tell her I'll give her a year if she drops that crime of violence. Right. And he walked in there and told her that. And she said, okay. And so she got her 16 years instead of 15. I got the crime of violence dropped. And what that means, crime of violence in Colorado, you're going to do 75% of your time, most of your time. Okay. You're not going to be eligible for some of the education programs and stuff like that. And so I knew that was going to make a big difference. And so, got done with that. I was probably the happiest person ever in the history of the world to be sentenced to 16 years. Right? Mm-hmm. Woohoo! 16
Way better than 384.
Yeah,
but parole or something's coming if you do right.
And especially with that nonviolent sentence. And so I ended up getting shipped off to prison. They sent me to Denver Reception Diagnostic Center. That's when it all became very real. That's the part of the story I always tell is, I'm handcuffed. And it's called being shackled. So I'm handcuffed, and my handcuffs are chained to my belt, and my belt is chained to my feet that are handcuffed, foot cuffed. Right. And so I'm shackled, and I'm on this bus, and you're riding in the bus, and you pull up to this building, and it's the Denver Reception Diagnostic Center. It's a prison. And you pull up, and there's row upon row of razor wire, right? And there's barbed wire, razor wire. There's a gun tower with armed guards on it, and they're there to shoot you if you do something you're not supposed to, Right. And it just becomes very sobering and real that I'm going to go to prison. You know what I mean? Like, it became very apparent.
It didn't hit you before?
No. I was in county.
You're used to county jail.
Yeah, I'm in county, and I know I'm going to prison, but man, it's very, you feel the weightiness of it. And you don't know what prison you're going to. And that's where they decide where they're going to send you, right? And so I end up going, going in there, they assess you. They see if you're involved in any gangs. They see what your medical needs are, blah, 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 blah. And then they send you to a prison. And I ended up getting sent to Huerfano County Correctional Center, which is in Walsenburg, Colorado. It's a private prison. It's called CCA then, but it's now Core Civic. I'm sure you've heard about some of that in your Senate days. Right,
I've heard of some of them.
Yeah, and so I went to that prison in Walsenburg, and the first unit I walk into, this guy comes up to me. His name's Charles Frederick. And he comes up and he goes, my name's Charles, and I'm a Christian. He's a big dude, even bigger than me. And he had a Semper Fi tattoo on his arm. Right. And I'm like, well, Charles, you look like you know your way around the joint, but you can leave all that Jesus stuff at the door because I don't want to hear about it.
You said that?
Yeah. I said, but we can be friends. And he said, okay. And so he just befriended me. And so you go in there and, you got like your, a couple sets of greens and a couple sets of undies and like a cup and a spoon. Like that's what you're in there with, right? And so he's been in there for years. And so he's got sweats, soups, coffee, all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And so he's hitting me with all this stuff and just being my friend. Mm-hmm. And that went on, and he coached softball, and I joined his softball team, and he used that as a ministry opportunity to minister to people. And as conversation would allow, he would plant gospel seeds. He was never browbeating me or anything like that. And so he would just teach me, talk to me, ask me questions. And was just a good friend. Right. And he ended up getting shipped off to another prison. They closed that prison down. I went to Bent County Correctional Center, which is in Los Animas, Colorado. And I was there for about 6 months, and then I got sent to another prison, which was it's called Arrowhead, which is in Canyon City, Colorado.
Why do they move people around so much?
So your security level drops. And so the first one was because they closed the prison.
Okay.
So they closed that prison, and then they moved me to Bent County Correctional in Los Animas, and that was medium security, which is still pretty rough. Not maximum.
So you were at
but
max or top over here?
No, I was at medium to start with.
Okay,
I was
from
never
private
above
medium to another medium. Okay,
yeah, exactly. So then went medium, and then they lowered me to what's called like medium high, or I forget what it was called. It was it wasn't minimum. Rare? It was like, it's like medium rare, I guess would be the best way. I forget what the name of it is. Someone was going to watch this podcast. They're going to text me, this is what it is. I can't believe you forgot, Dawson. So, yeah, I was in that. So I wasn't at like the Camp Cupcake with no fence, you know what I mean? And like water polo and stuff that they do or whatever they do with those low ones that I never made it to. But, so they have a fence, but that was really it. And like you could leave and like go to work and stuff, but they made a mistake sending me to Arrowhead because my sentence was too big and my crime did not match being at Arrowhead. And they realized after I was there for a month, and it's up in the mountains. And I'm like, this is great. You know, they've got like gardens and stuff there. And so the food's really good. And you're up in the mountains. And I was just like, wow, this is amazing. Right. And then they're like, pack your stuff. You're going to Sterling. And I'm like, and it was funny because the reputation of Sterling Correctional Facility within the Colorado prison system is like, you don't ever want to go there. It's awful. It's horrible. And so I have all these things, and again, this is a trust in God thing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's going to be terrible. It's going to be terrible. And I was all about trying to better myself. So when I first got to Walsenburg, not only was I friends with Charles, but I took my GED. I helped tutor people. I was always involved in programs. I was always trying to better myself. And they didn't have a whole lot at Bent County. Arrowhead had pretty much nothing because it was a minimum, it was like a work camp. And so they end up sending me to Sterling, and I get to Sterling, and two things happen. The first thing that happened, I walk out on the yard. The first person I see is Charles. There's Charles again. Okay. And the other thing, I look at their education building, and it's bigger than Arrowhead's whole facility. Okay. It's a massive prison. It's the biggest prison in Colorado that's a state level prison. They have federal prisons there, but this is the state prison. And it's just massive education building full of, they've got college classes, they've got graphic design, printing technologies, computer information systems, welding, culinary.
Oh my goodness.
They have everything.
Have everything. And I'm like, I can't believe I didn't want to come here. Like, this is like, mecca of trying to change my life. And so I got in there, and Charles began to work on me. I began to get into the education programs. I took some graphic design, a lot of the stuff that kind of helped me do some of this stuff. And not that I did the graphic design, but anyway, a lot of skills that I learned there that were very directly applicable to what I did when I got out. Right. Okay. And so took computer information systems, graphic design, printing technologies, different stuff. Doing that while Charles is, continuing to minister to me. And he says, hey, look, Bryan, you are going to have parole coming up in a few years. You should really get some certificates. You need to get in some of these classes. And I'm like, sure, yeah, sign me up. Well, he's the chaplain's assistant, and that should have been my first clue. Mm-hmm. But he signed me up for some of these there faith-based programs. Okay. And so he swindizzled me into these faith-based programs. And the first one, though, it was really cool. It was kind of come as you are. It's a bunch of other really strong Christian dudes in there that were very much like Charles. And I'm like, wow, this is fun. And I didn't want to admit it, but I really enjoyed the fellowship with these guys. Right. And that class ended, and I went to Charles. I'm like, hey, man, if you can get me in another one of those classes, I need a certificate. Right. And so he gets me in, and I go. And this one was called the Truth Project. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. It's done by Focus on the Family and a guy named Dr. Del Tackett, someone I need to have on my podcast. He's fantastic. Strong Christian worldview apologetics course. Okay. And it's very much not come as you are. This is what the Bible says. And that really challenged me, and I didn't like it because I still wasn't a Christian yet. And so I would sit at my table. They do an hour lesson, and then it would be an hour of table discussion. And I would just argue with the people and tell them how stupid they were for what they believed. Right. And so I'm telling them all. And again, you got to remember these might have been Christians, but they're still convicts. Right. And you guys are stupid. I can't believe you believe this. And I'm fixing to get in fights with these guys. And I end up going back, leaving there, going back to my unit. So the education building is here. My unit's over here, and there's a sidewalk that takes you back. And I'm walking with Charles, and Charles just looks at me and says, Bryan, why don't you give him a chance? And I've been told that a million times. And for whatever reason, it was like week 3 and the Truth Project. And I said, okay, I'll give him a chance. And so kind of flashing back a little bit when I lived
You're talking about Jesus. Give Jesus a chance. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Good. Thank you for clarifying.
Just making sure.
Not the guy next door.
Right. Not anybody. Right.
So, Jesus.
Yes.
Got it. So giving Jesus a chance. Right. And, I had gone to church when I was younger. My mom joined the Army, and I lived in Mannheim, Germany, went to Rhine River Baptist Church. And in my time there, I was around Christians and I knew that God was real and I wanted what these people had. Ended up having kind of a bad experience there that I didn't really understand what happened, but we stopped going to the church. And so I kind of had a bad taste in my mouth towards Christians, but I knew that this God was real. And so from that moment, I was like 9 years old forward, I always prayed and I knew God was real, but I didn't understand how Jesus factored into it. And I always prayed. And so I went back to my cell that night and I prayed. And that was a Saturday night when that happened. So I go back to my cell, I pray. I said, God, if I need to believe that this Jesus character was truly your son, and these were the areas that I had a problem with. I could believe that some Jewish guy got nailed to a piece of wood 2,000 years ago and created a cult following. I was all over that.
Right.
But I said, if
Which
I need
that's ahead of some people today.
Yes.
They want to pretend he wasn't even a real person.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I was a little bit in that direction. I was agnostic. I knew God was real. I just didn't understand Jesus and how he fit into the equation. And so I'm praying and I say, God, if I need to believe that this Jesus character was truly your son, that he was born of a virgin, scoffing as I say it, that he lived a sinless life. That's not what I said then. I said that he didn't do anything wrong his whole life, that he died and somehow his death did something for me, and that he rose from the dead. If I need to believe those things,
those are the tenets.
That's it.
Right.
And if I need to believe that to be okay with you, you're going to have to show me something. And so I went to bed that night and I had crazy nightmares. And in one of those nightmares, I was falling off of a cliff. And if you ever have those dreams where you're falling and like you wake up and you thought you were really falling and you look and I've just got sweat pouring down my face. And I look at the clock in my room and it said 3:16. And the only Bible verse I've ever known my whole life is John 3:16. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son. Whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. And that was the answer to my question. Only Bible verse I know.
No,
my clock says it,
right,
and I'm just like,
because God has no problem with you asking, "Hey, am I real? Tell me the deal." He's for that,
absolutely, and he knows the sincerity of someone's heart when they're asking that.
Yeah, if they're seeking or not,
fleece or exactly. Right. So I did that, and he showed me, and I tried to ignore it. It was 3:16 for what felt like 30 minutes, and it was Sunday morning at 3:16, and I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going to church. And so I went back to bed, woke up, and they call it Christian services there, and so I end up going to Christian services, and I go out. And I've got this idea in my head that Christians are all weak. I don't know. And in prison, it's weird because you got a lot of child molesters that hang out with the Christians so that they don't get beat up. You know what I mean? And sometimes they'll have
the Christians are their shield, their protectors.
To a certain degree. And then they have what's called like God pods, we call them, but they were like faith units. And this wasn't this way at Sterling, but it was at Walsenburg. And so like all the child molesters would go to the faith pod because they knew that they weren't going to get their commissary taken and stuff like that. Right. So anyway, this is kind of what I'm looking at, right, as I'm going through this transition. And I'm like, well, I don't want to be perceived as weak or anything like that. And so I go to my buddy Ramon, and Ramon was on the softball team. Charles' softball team. He's this big, huge black dude, and he was a gangbanger who brought the blood gang from California to Colorado. This dude's a bad dude.
Oh, okay.
And he's a Christian, big time Christian, like huge evangelistic Christian, like, and is very good at ministering to young black gangbangers, right? And that was his calling. And so I go up to, he sees me and he goes, "Hey man," and he knows, like, what are you doing up at 8:00 on a Sunday?
Right.
And so I go with him and we sit to the very back, off to the very side, as far away from the pulpit as I can possibly get. And I listen, and Chaplain Davis, I don't remember a single word that he preached. He went through the whole thing. And at the end, he said, I'm going to do an invitation. And so I looked at Ramon and I said, "Hey, what's an invitation?" And he didn't say, this is where you invite Jesus into your heart. This is, any of those weird things.
Do all this,
he said, "Look, if you've got something hindering your relationship with God, you can go down there and pray with that man about it." And I was like, okay. And he knew. And so Ramon actually stepped aside because he already knew what was happening. Mm-hmm. And so I go down there and I pray with Chaplain Davis, and he grabs my hand, puts his hand on my shoulder, and says, "How can I pray for you?" And I'm like, "Look, chap, I'm not up here to make any decisions. I just want you to pray that God would soften my heart so the truth can come in." That's it. And so, and that's exactly what he prayed. And he prayed that. And when he got done praying, I looked up in his face and he had tears pouring down his face. Mm. And I was just like, whoa. And I knew something had happened. Right. And it was just unreal, unbelievable. And I knew something had happened. And again, Chaplain Davis is not the type of dude that cries in front of prisoners, right? He's a total man's man,
Okay.
And so seeing this, I was just blown away. And I left there, and Charles gave me a Bible, and he said, "You need to start reading the story of Joseph, and don't stop." And so I started reading the story of Joseph, and I just kept reading my Bible, and that went on for about 9 months, and I was all in. I was at every faith-based program they had. I joined the choir, couldn't sing worth a lick. I mean, anywhere there was fellowship, I was in. I was all about it, right? And so, and one of the cool things too, and the reason I think Chaplain Davis was in tears, I mean, obviously the Spirit moved, but Chaplain Davis and Charles was the chaplain's assistant, but Charles and Chaplain Davis did not get along. They just rubbed each other wrong, right?
Okay.
And so it was kind of comical. It was one of the jokes, right, in the prison was they didn't get along. And the only thing that they ever really did together that they got along is they'd been praying for me for years, like 2 years. And then I show up on the yard, and then I start going to these programs, and then that happens, right? And so they'd been praying for that even before I got to that prison. So
From when Charles knew you before.
Yeah, from when he was at Walsenburg with me. He went to Sterling directly from there while I'm bouncing around these other prisons, and he's there with Chaplain Davis praying for me. And then I end up there.
Chaplain Davis has seen all this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's watched all of it. So that happens, and then so for the next 9 months, I'm just in the Word, doing all the things that I'm supposed to be doing, involved in the faith-based programs. And about 9 months in, I get to the point where I see all my friends that have pen pals. They're all writing somebody, and I'm like, man, that'd be cool if I could get a pen pal. And so I get the bright idea to call my mom, and she's running a Facebook page for me. And I always say, like, I don't even know how illegal this was, but
Right.
it may or may not have happened. But that's what I was doing. And so she was running a Facebook page for me, and like I had zero standards. I'm like, basically like, hey, someone that wasn't doing drugs that went to college. Seems fair. Mm-hmm. And so,
wait, that's what you wanted in a pen pal?
Yeah, just basically someone that wasn't a drug addict.
Okay.
Well,
you got to start somewhere.
That's right.
I mean, that's a pretty good standard.
Yeah.
I mean, because otherwise they'd be a drug addict.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't
I
want
can
that.
see it.
So,
Okay.
what am I mean? Because I don't want to write drug addicts.
No. I was going to say probably.
She was going to say, I thought you were smarter than that. No, but I get it.
When you say running your Facebook page, you had a Facebook page?
No. So my mom created a Facebook page for me.
To pretend
I'm in
that
prison, and she was basically like not pretending to be me, but just started a Facebook account and put my name and picture
so
on
that
it.
people
But
wouldn't know
why?
you were in
So
prison?
So that I could communicate with people. Like, so I would be on the phone with her, and she would, I'd say, hey, write this in a post, and she would post it. And then that way people could follow me.
Okay.
Yeah. And so.
But hopefully you didn't have many drug dealers following you at that point.
No, none. It was all people from my past that were, that was the thing. So I had all these friends that I went to school with, middle school, high school, whatever. And I'm sending these girls, hey, you want to write me in prison? And you'd be surprised.
They quit doing that, apparently.
Yes.
No, I was
wondering, I'm like, what is she?
Well,
Heisman.
girls always like
Yeah.
the bad guy. So now you're in prison.
It comes full circle. So, amazingly enough, I didn't get a bunch of bites and nibbles on the, do you want to write me in prison?
Okay.
Imagine that. So I've had enough rejection once again, and I let it go, and I said, look, God, if you want me to have a pen pal, you're going to have to do this.
I just think it's so cute that all these prisoners,
Want some pen
they
pals?
want pen pals.
Do they call them pen pals? Surely y'all
No,
had a
they
couple.
probably call them some
Ramon?
things that I won't, but yeah.
okay, all
and
right.
so, and a lot of them, they like, but again, people, the punishment in prison is the loneliness.
Yeah.
And you're in there with other prisoners, and you develop camaraderie with these people, and it's cool and whatever, but like you're longing for obviously, relations from someone of the opposite sex.
Mm-hmm.
And some guys are in there so long that they given up on that, and they find their companionship of people with the same sex, and that's no fun. So I went the pen pal route. So there you go.
Okay.
So I said, look, I'm not going to be able to take any more rejection. God, if you want me to have a pen pal, you're going to have to do this. And so I let it go. 2 or 3 weeks goes by. I call my mom just to check in. And she goes, hey, do you know a girl named Christina Ewan? I'm like, yep, I know Christina Ewan. That was the girl that put me in the friend zone back in 8th grade that I would have saw off my left arm to be
strike the
with.
pose.
Yes. So, I'm like, absolutely. And she goes, well, she wants to write you. And I'm like, she knows I'm in prison, right? So, yeah. I said, did you get her address? She said, yeah, I got her address. And I'm like, okay, cool. And so I wrote the first letter. And basically the first letter was, hey, look, I didn't get drunk and run somebody's dog over. I belong here. I deserve to be here.
Right.
Right. And so, that was, here's my situation. I'm in here. I earned the sentence. She wrote me back, and she's like, hey, look, I recently got divorced. I have a son. Life's been hard, but I just got saved like 6 months ago. So I'd been saved for like 9 months. She'd been saved for like 6 months. And so we just started writing handwritten letters back and forth about what God was doing in our lives, what we were reading in the Bible, what the preacher was preaching on. Then she would send me a book, and we would read the book together and write about what we were seeing in the book and stuff like that. It's a really cool way to get to know somebody, through written letter. It's not something we do a lot of anymore. And
So your salvation time was when you were
9 months prior to that.
with the pastor? When you said he's
I
going to
would
show
say
me?
I got saved.
So that's when you got saved right there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I would credit that day with that.
Okay.
Yep.
Look at me. I'm nodding.
'cause you're
like it's my
repentant.
story. But when you keep talking, I'm like, oh, this is my favorite part. And then you
then
get
the
to the
next
next part.
part's his
I'm like,
favorite
oh,
part.
this is my favorite. But this is my
Next
this
favorite
is
part.
my
This
one
is
of
this is my second favorite
Yeah.
part.
Okay.
This is my second favorite
Okay.
part. So, actually I already got to the second favorite part where Christine is writing me. But anyway, so
Just wait.
you've thrown me off.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. So,
You're going through the books.
You're doing
we're
a
going
book
through the books,
study.
we're doing all that, and I get to the point, I'm like, man, I can't help but feel like there's a spark here that wasn't there.
Right.
And like
In eighth grade.
it wasn't there in 8th grade or 9th grade or 10th
It was
grade or
there-
11th
it was
grade or
there for
12th
me,
grade.
but I'm hoping for you.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
right.
But I could tell there was like some reciprocation in the spark, right?
Okay.
And so I'm like, I mean, my stock can't get any lower here, guys. I mean, let's think about
Right.
this.
You're not worth a lot.
Yeah, I've got 10 years left on my
Right.
sentence. And I'm just like, but I can't help the way I feel, And so I wrote it out. Hey, look, I can't help but feel like something's going on here that, maybe you might feel the same way I'm feeling,
She gonna check the box.
Yeah,
and send it
check
back
yes
to
or
you.
no.
You got to
and,
go through snail mail.
yeah, and so
That's
that's
painful.
it is. And so I write this letter out and say, look, I can't help but feel like something's going on here. We want the same things out of life. We have the same values. We're in the same place kind of in our faith walk. What are you thinking? And so I write that, as she said, snail mail, put it in the thing, put a stamp on it, put it in the mailbox. It takes a week to get there. She writes, snail mails it back. And so I'm sitting there for 2 weeks waiting, after 5 years of middle school and high school rejection, just, getting heavier and heavier on my shoulders with each passing day. I don't
Thinking
get a
that
letter.
she's never not
Yeah.
gonna write anything back.
Just not even
I'll
right
run her
back
off.
and just gone, right? And so that was the risk I took. Finally, one day they called my name in mail call, and I look and I pull the letter out and kind of do one of the, things where you kind of barely look at it. And she said, look, Bryan, I feel the exact same way. I know God wants me to be with you no matter what, whether you get out in 10 days or 10 years, I'm going to be here. And I was just like,
This is the
whoa.
touchdown dance,
Oh, that
not
is-
the Heisman.
Yes. So I was like, whoa, this is crazy. And
Maybe you should have gone for a second time back in 8th grade.
yeah.
It's,
Oh no, it was
get-
rejection throughout middle school and high school.
Oh, so that happened multiple times.
Multiple times. Yeah. Yeah. No, it was bad. Crash, meet, burn. So, yeah, I don't want to talk about it.
Okay.
Hey, but I win in the end.
You
Yes,
do
and
win.
that's
all that
fine.
matters.
It's a good
That's all
story.
that matters.
Bigly.
Bigly.
so now you got
Huge.
10 years left.
So I have
Wait,
10
wait,
years
wait.
left.
Wait,
Oh, there's
don't-
more good
don't
stuff?
wait.
Yeah.
Wait, just wait.
Yeah. So, so that happened. She tells me that I'm going to be eligible for the halfway house soon, but there's no way they're letting me out to a halfway house with my sentence and all this other stuff. But, she tells me she wants to be with me. She's going to be there. And I'm like, great. And what was interesting, and I don't talk about this a lot, one of the hardest things for me to do was accept that she felt that way about me.
Mm.
And what I mean by that was only bad things happen to Bryan Dawson. That was a core belief that I had inside of me up to that point. Only bad things happen to me. Good things don't happen. So I'm literally like waiting for the piano to fall out of the sky.
Right.
She's going to write me and say that she found somebody else, or she's going to write me and, I don't know, right? All these crazy things going through my head. And it literally took me about 6 months to finally accept it. When it may have been closer to a year. So,
I mean, and at that point, are you thinking I don't deserve this?
no, absolutely. I don't deserve this, and then good things don't happen to me. And also, I didn't have real great feelings about women at the time either, because of previous women that I dated that were on drugs.
Right.
So
Well, that's
can't
not
really
a
formulate
fair
an opinion. Exactly. No,
representation.
I didn't say it was fair.
It's
I just said it
probably
was
good that you were in, because if you were out of prison and still dealing with those same problems and issues, there's other things you can do.
Yeah.
But since you were in prison, that time allowed you to get through some of that.
Yeah, it was potentially the hardest thing I've ever gone through, is trying to really wrestle through that. And again, I never talk about this part of the story, so you won't.
Well,
hear
that's
this on any
why
recordings.
Alabama Unfiltered
That's right.
is
It's the best.
unfiltered. Right.
That's right. That's why Greg Phillips comes and tells his story, and so does a less known bearded man. So yeah, I struggled with that. Put in for the halfway house. I put in for this program called the Peer 1 program, and the Peer 1 program is the most challenging behavior modification program of its kind in the country. It's called a therapeutic community. And it's in Denver, Colorado. And I thought 2 thoughts were, 1, I might be able to get out sooner if I put in there because it's so hard, they might actually give me a chance. And then 2, I wanted to have some type of a buffer between prison and me getting to Christina and her son. And, you know, and for her family to see, you know, for it to be, you know, acceptable, I'm sure. Her family didn't have real
I haven't
good
thought
thoughts.
about that part of the story.
Yeah. And it's
Hey,
funny, 'cause
Mom,
my nephew's
I'm in
actually in the
love.
studio and he was there when that was all happening. So, anyway, so
He was little though.
yeah, he was probably still like, Aunt Chrissy going crazy.
he probably heard that.
Yeah. I'm sure his mom was saying that.
I
So,
just have not thought about that part. Like,
Yeah.
What if one of my kids? came
oh
home and
man,
said,
I've got some funny stories I have to
like-
tell about
Yeah.
that too when we get
I'm in
to
love
that
with the
part.
guy from prison.
Oh yeah. So there's some super funny stories about that I don't ever tell either that I'll tell.
Will
here
you tell
too.
him?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good.
So I get out to this program. They accept me. I go there. I go to this program. The first 6 months I'm there. She can write me. I can't write her. Time out.
You hate it when I do this, but this is like where if you've proven yourself, there's a special facility or place or somewhere, and you go through this. It's not in the prison, so you're out.
Yeah,
of,
no, it's a halfway house. It's separate.
Okay,
It's
okay.
in Denver, Colorado. It's at the Anschutz Medical Campus and some old military base that they turned into basically a rehab
It's like
and mental health
therapeutic
thing.
boarding school. Or
Yeah,
something.
essentially. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And so you're there, and the first 9 months you're doing treatment, and then after that you have a job. It's a 2-year program. The first year you're inpatient. The second year you're outpatient, and then so the first 6 months you can't write anybody or call anybody, but they can write you. And so Christina says, "Hey, how often do you want me to write you?" And I'm like, "I don't know, once a week." And this to me, like, people need to be doing the story on Christina and not me. She's way more amazing than me. And so she was, and I guess I can just throw that part in why I'm in Alabama. She was in Alabama. Okay. So she was living in Elmore County, Alabama, in Eclectic, Alabama.
That's where all the godly women are.
Yes, exactly. No, it was great. I found me one.
Right.
So, and so her mom was dying of cancer in Brunswick, Georgia area, St. Mary's, Georgia, somewhere out there. I'll just say Brunswick area. So it's 6 hours from where she lives. She's working at Baptist Health. She's a full-time at Baptist Health, full-time student at Troy, single mom. And I think she was doing something else. But anyway, single mom, that was enough.
Yeah.
And then so Monday she would, or Monday through Friday, she goes to work, goes to school, you know, goes to work, picks up her son, does digital online school,
Right.
goes to bed, gets up, does it again. Friday, she goes, picks up her son from daycare, drives 6 hours to go take care of her dying mother, drives Sunday 6 hours back, okay, and starts and does it over again.
Right.
And she's writing me a letter a week. Unbelievable.
That's incredible.
She's incredible. And she is incredible. And so
I don't know you well, but I'm not sure you're worth it.
No, I'm not.
I mean,
like, there's no way.
right.
Do you see why I was like, I don't deserve this, God?
It's a God thing.
Yes.
That's
And
the only way to
so
explain
all
it.
good gifts are from above, right? And so that was a big part of me learning to accept it, is that she was faithful for 26 letters, a letter a week for 26 weeks.
Right.
For those 6 months, the letter was there on time every single time.
And nothing from you.
And nothing from me. And so she didn't know what was going on with me.
Wow.
And she could call and talk to my counselor like once a month or whatever and get an update. Yeah, you know, he's doing good. Blah, blah, blah,
He's still
whatever.
alive.
Yeah. And
What
so
do they do for? You said treatment for 9 months. What
buddy,
do they,
that's a
it's
whole
not-
nother
it's not-
podcast episode.
Okay, all right.
But so
It's not Christian based or anything.
No,
it's very
far from it. And it stinks because it could really be like they've got a lot of things right, but they got a lot of things
Right.
wrong. But therapeutic community, see if I can do this justice. It's so hard to explain the elements of it without actually being there and showing. But the idea was to create a high stress, high pressure environment so that you'll snap, but you snap in an environment where there's a safety net.
Yeah.
And they have all kinds of opportunities for you to work. It's a peer group. It's peer counseling. So if I'm there and I'm stressed out and this program's driving me crazy and I finally lose it, they'll snap and they'll do what's called a game, and then they'll circle it up and they'll be like 6 or 7, you know, essentially inmates, right? They're for clients, I think. I forget what they call them in the program, but they're inmates to me. So 6 or 7 other inmates in there, and they circle it up. What's going on? What's going on?
Right.
Man, this is ticking me off, blah, blah, blah. You say probably some other choice words in it, and this, that, and the other. And then they start to analyze, like, well, why are you feeling that way? Why is that? Is that really that big a deal? You're making this a bigger deal than it really is. You're overthinking this. And you start to really have other people helping you see how stupid your thought process is and how erroneous it is. Meanwhile, you're taking classes that are showing you about these thought patterns and behaviors and stuff. And it's actually It's really, really helpful. They teach you about how to run a house as far as like, cleaning, cooking. It was just, I can't do it justice in a short sitting, but it's a hugely beneficial program for me. Helped me so much, helped me learn so many things that I use each and every day in my life. I learned in that program. And it was hard. It was extremely hard. And I mean, some of the things they would do to address your behavior, again, it was very kind of military in the sense of like drill sergeant. And so you would, when you first get to the program, you're not even allowed to look people in the eyes. You're in orientation, so you have to look at the ground all the time, and you're wearing a white t-shirt and you're setting the table. And like if you put the fork sideways or it's not straight, the person that's the orientation head, they call him the OTH, he would come around and be like, that fork's crooked. Support monad, Bryan D. And so monad is you nose and toes on the wall. Support monad. So I'm supporting monad and I'm on the wall. And then they'd be like, Bryan D, come off monad, you need to trim. And so I'd stand about 10 feet away from him and I'd go, oh, okay. And then they just lay into you. The Marines. Yeah, absolutely. That fork's crooked because your life's crooked, right? You can't get anything right. And if you continue to have crooked forks, you're going to have a crooked line and just, tear you apart. And then when you're done, you go, oh, okay.
So instead of yes, sir,
yeah,
you say, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's that, 24 hours a day, right? And then you'd go on monad encounters. And so you'd be
What does monad stand for?
Yeah.
Monad is, and so I don't know what monad stands for, but they have dyads and triads. And a dyad is you and one other person, and a triad is you and three people.
So monad is your time.
Yeah. Your time to talk to yourself.
Okay.
It's a highly respected tool of the program. That's what they call it. And so, but then they'd go monad encounters. And so one day we were on the wall for like 13 days, right? So we'd get up at 5 a.m. until 10 p.m. and you would do standing, sitting, standing, sitting, standing, sitting, standing, sitting. And that went on for 13 days. They were trying to break you.
Yeah.
And so that when you would break, you would snap, and they would be there to figure out what caused you to snap, so that when you were out there, you
wouldn't snap.
You wouldn't snap, or if you snapped, you knew how to deal with it.
Well,
right?
because in normal life, you snap. You're left with yourself and your own self-talk and your own bad habits and your own bad thinking.
Self-talk. She's been to TC before. I'm telling you now. You can keep an eye on her.
Yeah. That's a whole other podcast.
So we'll do that one next time. Okay.
That's a whole other podcast. But yes, like you've got to rewire, especially after what you've been through and the trauma of your childhood and all of that. Like you have to rewire that. And that's the only way you break it.
Yeah.
That's the only way. It's so extreme.
And then you get to the point where you can go out and work, and then you go and you work all day. And then, so I'm going to work.
What's your work?
So at first I was working day labor, right? I'm making $7 an hour scraping insulation in like 105 degree heat. Ugh. Brutal. And so then I get a job doing tax resolution sales, which is a weird switch. But there was a guy that was doing it there, and I'm like, man, I got to find some air conditioning. Mm-hmm. That was kind of my real goal. And I knew that I was good at sales.
In the world?
This is out in Denver. Yeah, it's in Denver, Colorado. Okay. Yeah, it's out in Denver. And so I had a friend that was working at this law firm that was doing tax resolution sales, and they had a sales floor, and they would essentially get tax liens, and they would run through those tax liens and find people's names and stuff. Then you call and be like, hey, I see that you owe the government money, blah, blah, blah. We can help, like that. And so I went and applied for that job. I felt so uncomfortable, again, that whole this can't be real type of stuff. Right. And I walk in, and I've been working, taking the bus to day labor, and just not this. And then I walk into this place, and they got like marble floors with like water fountains and all that stuff. And I'm like, I don't belong here. They're gonna call security. Right. And so I go in there, and my eyes are all big the whole time, and I'm filling out my job application, and they do the interview, and I do the interview, and the guy's like, you'll do awesome here. And I'm like, come again?
Right.
But that's your bent, sales.
Yeah.
Like
when they send you out, do they send you out in good clothes, or are you in prison looking clothes?
No. You're completely in society. There's no ankle monitors. There's no nothing, right? And so.
But he wants to know what you're wearing.
Yeah.
It looks similar to this. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's just normal clothes. Yeah. Okay. And so when you get there, what do they call it? Anyway, there was a barn full of clothes that were donated, and we had a term for it. I forget what it was. It was a funny term. But, you don't got any clothes, go out to the shed.
Somebody
then you go out in the shed.
Bryan and tell him what it's called.
Give me what it's called. And we would go out there, and they had clothes, right? And then your family could bring you clothes and stuff like that. But, I mean, you would be taken care of. There was.
You're not like in your greens. Or what'd you call them? Greens?
No, that's greens. Yeah, greens was prison. And so one of the other things that was bad, too, is they have all kinds of food donated to this place. And so you go down to the basement of Motivation House, which there was 3 buildings. And in the basement, it's like nothing but cakes and pies. And like I've been in prison. I was 5 years, 2 months in prison. I had no cakes and pies. You know what I mean? And I like cakes and pies.
Right.
And I get out. I'm like 215, 220 pounds. I got in them cakes and pies. And I'm stress eating because you're talking about your feelings, you know what I mean? And you're in there and you're ready to snap and you're just like, I'm going to go nuts.
How'd you get?
Yeah. And I got up to like 285. I'm now 300. So never went back down.
You're
Cakes and
cakes and pies. Yeah, they have them out here.
They do. They had them in abundance there. And so, and also when I was doing tax resolution sales, I would be sitting there with cakes and pies. It was a bad habit. So anyway.
Hey, as long as you're not back with El Chapo.
That's right. Not Chico and El Chapo. So, yes. So there's that. Where was I? I feel like we got completely derailed.
You go, and for 6 months, she sends you letters.
She sends me letters.
Talk.
There you
Okay,
go.
so
Thank you for getting me back on track after getting me off track.
Sorry.
So it was her responsibility
She did
to
ask
get
the
me back on
question.
track.
I'm just listening.
So, finish that. I get to the point where I go out, find a job. Kind of told you about the things that I was doing for work. And then I get to the point in the program where I'm able to go out on visits. And so she comes and she flies out here. We go on a visit. Our very first visit, we got married. And I actually proposed to her on
He just glossed over that. He said that you said that there was no buildup or anything. Like this.
Cue the music, Adrian.
Yeah, the girl that gave you the Heisman in 8th grade.
Yes.
That
and
becomes your pen pal.
Over and over the Heisman, which
Over
I
and
missed.
over.
Right.
And she hasn't seen you in years.
Well, she came and
You-
saw me in prison. I skipped that part.
And you weigh 285 and you eat pies
Eating
and
cakes
cakes
and
all the
pies.
time.
Well, she said yes. You know, like we knew we were going to get married when I was like 205, looking really good in prison.
Okay, right.
And then the cakes and pies happened, and then she saw me, and I was like, we kind of made the
Right.
Like-
right.
kind of tricked her.
For better, for worse.
Yeah.
She's
No, I
like,
think
yeah.
actually by the time we got married, I was more 260, but you know, she loves me for
But
me.
where do you
For
go
who
get
you
married?
are.
Yeah.
She's like,
Where did you get
Hey, boy.
married?
So yeah, I'll do that. So
I'm sorry.
there's the 3 houses at Pier 1. You have Motivation House, Dedication House, Inspiration House. I was in Inspiration House. She came to see me that Friday. I wasn't able to go on a visit, but they let me see her, and she came on the front porch. And I got down on a knee and proposed to her and asked her to marry me on the front porch of a drug
Okay.
rehab. How romantic is that?
That is great. Were your buddies there to go like, woohoo?
They were all looking through the windows.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's so sweet.
Yes. And this is actually the ring.
Because it's redemptive. You
Yes.
know, it's like God redeems all things.
Yes. And this is actually the ring that I proposed to her with. And so this was a $3 ring that I
So
got.
you put that on her finger.
I did. And so this was the ring that I was wearing when I was in Pier 1 to make it look like I was married. And so I've got it. It was like $3 at this, Christian bookstore or
What
whatever.
does it say?
It says, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord.
Look at you.
And that turned out to be
Really,
pretty prophetic.
really do.
So,
Yeah.
so I gave her that.
She says yes, of course.
She says yes. We got married the next day. We went to my grandma's house and had a pastor that I knew who came and did the ceremony. Him and his wife came. My grandma was there, and my mom was on speakerphone, and we got married.
Is this
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
How excited was your wife's?
No.
She's still in Louisiana.
No, Mamu was still in Louisiana. This is
Okay.
Grandma Barb.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now your wife's family,
hmm
they're really excited about this.
They don't know about this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Which was not the ideal plan. I don't recommend that. I'm real big on asking the father, but Christina had been married and divorced already, and she was real big on, look, I'm not going to tell anybody. I know this is the right decision. I'm going to do it. And I'm not like sitting in a really good position to argue with that. I'm like, she really wants to marry me. I think we should
Right.
let her. That was kind of my thought.
Just don't talk her out. of it. No, don't talk her out. Right. Yeah, I
Hurry
got
up,
you.
hurry up. So, so she says, we do the marriage thing, do the I do thing, and that was good. And anyway, I won't tell you about the parts that come after that. You guys have been married,
Yeah.
so
Well, you do have 7 kids. So
Yeah,
we can
so, yeah,
guess.
there's-
Right.
oh yeah. So,
Anyway,
anywho,
Moving
your
along.
nephew's
Moving
like,
along.
he's blushing.
I mean, there are questions about because you're in prison and
Yeah, no.
how much time do they give
timelines
you?
and
Maybe-
yeah.
if you watch, never mind.
right.
And so I was at the halfway
Don't take
house
a
when we
lot
got
of
married, so
time.
it wasn't
Doesn't-
prison.
doesn't
There
take
wasn't
a lot of time. I
anything
got
like
you.
that. So yeah,
Right.
And I'm basically towards the end of the what do they call that when you're in the program? I just said it a second ago. Internal treatment, or what do you call that when you're? I just said it. Gosh,
Treatment?
words.
I don't know prisons.
Anyway, so it's like you have like when you go to therapy and you're in house and then there's out house, right? So like you're in the
Like a
you're
halfway house?
checked in. Inpatient.
Okay.
Inpatient versus outpatient. Thank you.
Okay.
So inpatient, that was towards the end of my inpatient. We get married. I wasn't supposed to get married because that's entering into a legal contract while you're in a sentence, but there's no way I was not going to do it because it was really important to me and it was very important to Christina that we were married before, we did that.
Before she got away.
Yes.
No, it
that's
was.
right. Yeah.
So what?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
didn't you
being
have to
serious.
go
I'm
back
understanding what
and
he's
do
thinking.
something? Didn't you
Yeah,
get in
no,
trouble?
somebody told on me because that guy got caught getting
What
married and
a
he just told on me and I'm
loser.
like, bro,
Right.
and so he told on me. And it
So
was
then
funny.
you went and beat him up.
No, I learned my lesson from
See?
beating
Okay.
up people that told
Right.
on me, so that they knew that I was healed and clean and ready to be let go because I didn't beat that guy up. But so anyway, I'm really getting down in the nitty gritty of the story. Hopefully, we're keeping people's attention.
No, it's so good.
Okay. So they send me back to day one, phase one, which is the very beginning of the program.
Because you got married.
Because I got married. And the thing was, they weren't really that mad that I got married, but and one of the reasons that a lot of people that have been in prison and have those emotional issues and some of the same issues I was just telling you about that screws up and that they end up relapsing, though they seem like they were doing really, really good, is they get into a relationship, right? And
Okay.
so that program is a secular program, and they promoted promiscuity, and I wasn't about that. I'm like, no, I'm a believer. This is how we do it.
Because
And-
promiscuity is better than a relation.
That's what they think, though. They're godless pagans.
Right.
I
So, I
probably
mean,
shouldn't have said it that
No,
way,
I think
but,
that's probably
Well,
the
I mean,
appropriate
yeah.
way.
Yes, and so that was what they promoted. Go and sow your wild oats. Go do whatever. Blah blah blah. And I'm like, well, that's not what I want to do.
Have a bunch of kids who don't have
Yeah.
a dad, so they can come and help with this
exactly.
program.
or just abort them.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, that was that was the worldview of the place. But again, I don't want to speak too poorly of the place because it was hugely
Right.
beneficial to me. But that was a place that we were at odds, and so all the people there making fun of me. Oh, you look at you getting married because you want to follow God. I mean, it's literally like getting mocked, right, for trying to obey God.
Right.
And then they were some like, oh, that's not why you did it, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, I know why I did it. Christina knows why we did it. I went back to the beginning of the program, and I didn't know how long I was going to be stuck at the beginning of the program. I could have been there another 6 months or
Yeah.
whatever. And, but man, I learned so much in going back to the beginning of the program of learning how to just be okay with things and just trust God and just be like, you know what, this is where I am. This is where I did what I thought was right.
Right.
And, there's a joke in Pier 1, you can do anything you want in Pier 1. You just have to be able to accept the consequences. And I really came to understand what that saying was. And I'm like, you know what? I did what I wanted to do. I'm still married. She's going to be there when I get out. And so
Give me your best.
yeah, I'll scrub these toilets with this toothbrush or do whatever you need me to do the dishes. And once they saw that, and I had done so well in the program, they thought I kind of like skated through because apparently I'm smart, according to Allison. And they noticed that. And I kind of just skated
You
through.
are.
And they didn't think I really got treatment. So they looked at me getting married and they're like, this is our chance to give Dawson treatment because he didn't really get any going through the program.
You
I
just
did,
went through
but
the motions.
but usually through that first year and a half, you have a breakdown where you have to go through a major discipline. And each person that goes through the program has something like that. Well, I didn't. And so they wanted to use that as the opportunity to teach me what you learn in that major discipline. And so I did, and I did learn quite a bit from it. It was really, really good.
Did you have a breakdown the second go?
No. So it was just that major discipline was the breakdown, right? So they sent me back and I'm on the wall and I'm thinking about
Okay.
going back to prison because I'm like, man, how dare these people tell me I can't get married, blah, 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 and having all those thoughts. And
Do you go back to Nomad?
no, I was on Monad for like 4 or 5
Monad.
days. And then they do another thing at the program that they don't do anymore. What do they call them? They would cover all the windows with black paper and it was like a blackout. I forget what they called a marathon.
You couldn't know, you wouldn't.
They got rid of all the clocks, covered all the windows, and then you would just basically like no one was allowed to sleep, and that would go for like 4 or 5 days of a marathon. And you have no idea what time it is in the day or anything, and you're sitting there in a circle, talking about what your dad said to you when you were 14 or so, what I mean, like whatever,
Oh my word.
And I mean, it was insane. And they don't do that anymore. I thought it was beneficial. Again, I like the intensity of the program. I thought it was very effective and helpful. It was an interesting time. But again, the thing that they're doing, life is hard. Like you guys know that. Life is really freaking hard.
Right.
Like really hard. And when you've been in prison where life is not that hard, and or whatever else, it's out.
Time out. You just
Okay.
said prison wasn't very hard.
Yeah, I mean you
Like, you mean it
sit
from
there
the-
and
it's
eat
predictable.
Cheetos and like exercise until you get out. I mean, sure you
There's
have
no You don't
You're
have
saying it's
to deal
predictable.
with things
Yeah,
because everything's
there's not
taken care of.
responsibilities,
You're,
exactly.
You're a hamster.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's hard in the sense that, you don't have, you can't just go hang out with your friends, or you can't go hang out with your girlfriend or your wife or your kids or whatever. And I was very fortunate. I didn't have a wife and kids. I didn't have any of that when I was in there. And that would have been, I don't know how people deal with that. I couldn't. And so, it was easy for me in that sense. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to take you from being a completely dependent human being that's been in prison, put as much pressure on you as they possibly can, make it as hard as they possibly can. And so that you'll break, and then also so that you'll learn that it's hard. And there's a thing in the program that they say is that it doesn't get easier, but it gets better. And I have found that to be true in life. That is a fact of life. It doesn't get any easier, but it gets better. Right. And as you get through the program, you get more freedom, you get more opportunities, you get these things, but you still have the root responsibilities that you have to take care of. And as long as you're taking care of your responsibilities, you get more and more freedoms in the program. And so it's very cool. And then they get to the point where you're out and you get your own place and all that. And I finished the program, kind of graduated with honors, if you would. I got to speak. I was one of the speakers at the graduation. There was, 30 or 40 people that graduated with me. No, there wasn't even that. It was like 20. And so that's the thing, is like, only like 20% of the people that start the program graduate.
So that's one of my questions. Really? Like, I was thinking about, if you're going through that, and I'm sorry, I'm all over the place. Your faith, like, how do you make it through something like that? Because part of when you say it doesn't get easier, but it gets better, as a believer, you look back and you can say and see the times when God was faithful and when God, showed up and took care of you, even when life was hard. Okay. How do you go through something like that? Like, did you have friends that either did make it or didn't make it that weren't believers? And I mean, I know the answer is yes, but like, what did that look like? How did it look differently now that you're a Christian walking through that?
Yeah, interestingly enough, Charles was there as well, by the way.
What?
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask, because Charles told you to start reading the story of Joseph.
Yes.
How did Charles get there?
So Charles, that was the halfway house that he chose to go to as well. Flashback on Charles. We could be here all day talking about this stuff. So flashback on Charles. Charles, we're back. So bring us back to Sterling Correctional Facility. We're in prison again. I'm there with Charles.
I need popcorn.
Charles put in to get paroled on 2 separate occasions while I was in there with him. He got denied both times. He was a role model inmate. There's no reason he should have got denied based off of, the patterns that we'd seen. And he's like crying out to God, like, God, why am I not getting paroled? Well, he got to watch me get saved. And like literally like 2 weeks after I got saved, he got out. Gone.
So God was like, hold on.
Yeah. And then he went to Pier 1.
Okay.
And then I ended up at Pier 1, and he's like 9 months ahead of me in the program. And so he's like, but he was going through it too, man. They got him too. I mean, they'll make you make fake, like out of crates, like fake jail cells that you got to sit in. I mean, dude, it's just, they get you, man. Yeah. And so Charles was going through it too, and he had a hard time with the program, and he ended up graduating, doing well. I ended up going through it, but how did I get through it, and how did my faith help me? It's the exact same thing I was dealing with in that. The program in my life are no different. That's how I look at it. Exactly what you just said is, you look back on past God's faithfulness in the past, and know that you're sitting in this position or situation that seems hopeless, and the only thing you can do is freak out or trust God. I go through that on a somewhat regular basis still as an adult, right? Every year, a couple of years, I get to a point where I'm like, God, I don't know what I'm going to do. This doesn't look good. The walls are closing in. And I just have to just trust that he's going to be faithful. And he is, over and over and over again. And it's so funny because like once I trust him, I'm like, yeah, I trusted him and it worked out. Next time I'm just going to trust you the whole thing. And then the next time, like the walls are bigger and they're closer, and and then you're like, oh no. And then you go through the same thing. And it's like this constant repetition of that exact thing. And I felt it very much in that program, and I felt it out of the program. But yeah, counting on God's faithfulness, knowing that the program is temporary. And Dave Booth, so they had therapeutic community in prison in Sterling. A guy by the name of Dave Booth ran the program, and he told me when I left, and he said, look, Dawson, don't quit. Don't quit. And so the Pier 1 sat on the edge of this massive park, and at the end of the park was a bus stop where the bus would run and you could go. And they also had a bell that was there. So you're in the foyer, and if you go out the foyer and you go across the street, you're in the park, and then in the foyer there's a bell. And so there's 2 things that most people did. We called it running across the park. They would snap and they couldn't handle it, and they would just escape, and they'd run across the park and they'd be gone, and they'd just put out a warrant for their arrest. they call that running across the park.
Okay.
Or you could go ring the bell and sit down, and the jail would come get you, and you go back to prison.
Whoa.
And that's what would happen when you
Yeah.
broke or snapped.
Yeah.
Or
And so,
if you couldn't take it
yeah,
any
and
longer.
so you're talking 20% of the people there graduate, something like that. 20% graduate, and so recidivism is 15%. Or 85%, excuse me, 85% of people that get out of prison go back.
Okay.
Right?
Of regular prison.
Of regular people. People that go to Pier 1 and graduate, so only 20% of the people that go to Pier 1 graduate. And then of those people, it's like flipped around where 80% will stay out if they've graduated Pier 1. Some maybe not that high, but it's way better, right? And so it's a really good program. But man, there was another point that I wanted to make in all of that with percentages. Oh, so when one of the craziest things was, when I was in orientation, you sit in there and they tell you, and you think it's like hyperbolic and they're just trying to like drill sergeant scare you. They say, look around this room and there's like 15, 20 people in the room. And they're like, half of these people are going to be dead or in prison in 5 years. And you're like, whatever, or they're like, a third of these people are going to be dead. A third are going to be in prison. A third of you are going to make it. And I'm like, whatever, dude. Well, I guess I've been out of the program for like 8 or 9 years now. A bunch of them are dead, overdosed on drugs, died, killed somebody, went and did life in prison. And I mean, it's like, whoa.
They were right about
They were absolutely right. And it was rough, man. I know, like, when I get a phone call from Charles now, and I'll go back to Charles here in a minute, but when I get a phone call from Charles, 80% of the time it's because one of our friends died.
Goodness
hung
gracious.
themselves.
Charles is still doing well?
Yeah, so Charles got married. I was the best man in his wedding. He's actually an elder at a Presbyterian church in Highlands Ranch, which is a suburb of Denver. He is an elder there, and he does maintenance at the church, and he's also an elder, and he does a prison ministry and kind of a drug addiction ministry there. I got to be the best man in his wedding, and then my son is named after him, Charles.
Very good.
Yeah, and so it's also double entendre. My grandma Barb was married to a guy named Charles too, but Charles, right? That's just a big name in my life. Is two pretty influential people.
So fast forward, you're married. Where do you move to? Because I got to get you to 1819 News. At least that'll be the stopping point. Is when we get you here.
That'll be another 30 minutes.
We'll do another show.
All right, so I'll wrap it up. So yeah, I get out, I graduate, and then I transfer my parole to Alabama, and we had actually bought a house in Shorter, Alabama, not knowing what Macon County was or anything like that. We just found this $96,000 house on this beautiful piece of land, and I'm in Colorado where everything's like $400,000, and I'm like, $96,000, yes.
Awesome. Right.
So we bought it, and I figured out why it was $96,000. It was in Macon County, but not that there's anything wrong with that.
No.
Right?
You could be a winner too.
But I loved it, and I'm telling you, I lived off Old Federal Road, and all the people that lived up and down Old Federal Road, best neighbors you could ever have, incredible people. There was like farms and butcher shop. I mean, it's just a really, really cool like place. Like if you wanted a homestead and stuff. And so, but when I moved in, like I would meet people and they'd be like, "You live in Macon County?" And I'm like, "I don't
even know what that means."
Yeah, it's Shorter, Tuskegee, like Victoryland Casino.
Victoryland.
I mean,
on the way to Auburn.
Do you even work here? Victoryland, nothing.
No, I know Victoryland,
Okay.
but I'm saying I don't know when you say Macon County. I don't know what that.
It's like between Montgomery County.
I know
and Lee
where
County.
it is, but I don't know what.
It's just very rural.
Is that like saying you live in North Shelby County?
It's a very poor county. Like there's
very similar to North Shelby
schools.
County.
Yes. Underperforming schools, a lot of crime.
Okay.
That kind of stuff. And so, and it's not like urban crime either. So it's, I don't know how you'd explain it, but it was interesting. My last day, there's so many stories. My last day living in Shorter before I moved to Wetumpka.
This is what we did to Greg
there was a high-speed chase that like went from Auburn to Shorter, and it ended in front of my house. There was like 26 cop cars, mostly state troopers. This dude gets out and runs, and they run and tackle him. And this is in my front yard, and I'm like,
awesome. You're like, oh, I'm used to this.
well, I'm like, well,
that was
glad
me.
it's not me.
Yeah, glad it's not me this time, and I'm moving to Wetumpka tomorrow. So anyway,
okay,
where was I? Bringing it back to 1819 News. So. We buy this house in Shorter. Christina is here. I'm still trying to get my parole transferred. It takes forever. She's pregnant with Gracie. So I don't know, I don't know what the timing was. Maybe 6-8 months after we got married, she ends up getting pregnant with Gracie, who is our oldest. And then Brennan is my son who came with the marriage, who's awesome. He's a stud, wonderful young man. You've met Brennan. Have you met Brennan?
No, I've not met Brennan.
You'll have
Apparently
to. We'll
he's
bring him
an
in.
amazing baseball player.
He hit 6 home runs in the All-Star season.
Oh, very
So
good.
I don't know that that's ever been done before, but it was pretty amazing.
Strong.
So yeah.
Let's book him.
But the biggest thing about Brennan that I like is the fact that he is a very faithful young man who's like, I don't know, I don't want to just go on bragging about my son. That's weird. But anyway, he's great. That's what I'll say. So they are in short are waiting on me to transfer down here. I finally transferred down here, and the job that I get is working in a group called USA Radio Networks, because my friend that I went to church with in Denver was the chief operations officer of USA Radio Networks. He's like, hey, do you have a job when you get to Alabama? I'm like, no. And he goes, okay, well, you can work for me. You know, you can work from home. You have to train yourself, baptism by fire, sink or swim. But I think you'll figure it out. You're a good sales guy. And so I did, and I figured it out and helped USA Radio Networks with their news product, was really successful with it. I won't go into all the details, but made a name for myself. Lee Habib discovered me. Lee Habib created Laura Ingram's radio show back in 2001.
Right. I remember that.
He discovered me, wanted me to come help him grow his show. My deal with Lee was, hey, I'll help you grow your show if you teach me everything you know.
Right.
And so I basically got to sit at the feet of Lee Habib for 4.5 years, learning everything about media, fundraising, politics, public policy, all this stuff from Lee. Absolute brilliant,
He's a brilliant guy.
Brilliant guy. So sat at his feet, learned everything from him, took his show from 80 stations to 330 stations, did a deal with Premiere and iHeart. That's as big as it gets in the business. Hit a total grand slam there. And again, this is all that, like, this is too good to be true, right?
Waiting
And and I finally got over the pianos falling out of the sky and just said, look, God obviously has something for me to do, and I'm just going to go out and do it every day with everything I have for his glory. That's it.
Because if the piano
And don't
does
worry about
fall,
tomorrow.
it's still his plan.
Yeah.
Correct.
Don't
What
say
are you
that.
going to do?
Don't say that, Allison.
Well, I'm just saying,
We don't
like,
want pianos.
I'm not saying it's going
I'm
to.
naming
but
it and claiming it. No
I'm saying,
pianos.
as a believer, oh my gosh, I'm trying to be like really thoughtful,
Philosophical.
and, yes, and encouraging. Anyway, whatever.
She's being very encouraging.
Very
The
encouraging.
piano- the piano-
Even if you do
the
get it with a
may
piano,
come,
I mean,
it'll be great.
Jesus wanted it.
Right.
Somehow there was some encouragement.
Yes. Wow. Can't wait to go get
Okay.
life by the horns now.
Let's do something great. Okay,
So-
wait. So you're selling stuff.
Yes, I'm selling stuff and things that aren't drugs. Okay, so I help Lee grow his show. He teaches me everything he knows. I'm also doing some big fundraising for national groups that are involved in politics and elections and, advocacy and all this other stuff. I helped this group raise $6 million to help Donald Trump get reelected, as well as all the down ballot Republicans. And so this is, July of 2020 to November of 2020. And I'm working with this group, 80 hours a week, blood, sweat, and tears, biggest election of our lifetimes. We've got to win, and then after 5 months of just working like crazy around the clock, raising all this money, executing the strategy, doing all this stuff, and watching what happened with the election. And you guys interviewed Greg Phillips, so I know I don't have to talk to you about what happened in that election.
We got it.
And so I just became disenfranchised with national politics, national public policy. We're not going to be able to fix DC, national media, national this, national that. Rush Limbaugh had died either close to that or was about to. I forget exactly what the
I think
timing
he
was.
died before the election.
Yeah, and so it was just like, national, in my mind, national syndication was kind of not what it was. I knew that it was going to have some challenges. And so I'm like, man, what are we doing? So I'm kind of licking my wounds after this, this lead up after all this work going up to the election. Then that happened. And I go to church, and my pastor is preaching on localism. Fathers, fix your families. Families need to be in churches. Churches are part of communities. Community, city, city, county, county, state. This is how we win. So I go home, pray with my wife. God, how can I use my gifts, talents, abilities, resources, relationships to make a difference for my people in place here in Alabama? A week later, Caleb Crosby calls me from the Alabama Policy Institute. Phil Williams is offered a spot in Huntsville to replace Rush Limbaugh in Huntsville. And so he's asking me questions about radio, and I'm a radio guy, so I'm answering all his questions, kind of helping them get some ideas of what they could do and how they could monetize it and blah blah blah. And as we're talking, me and Caleb were just like, what would be better? Not I don't want to say better, but what we need, as well as a radio show in Huntsville that will eventually be statewide, is we need a statewide news and multimedia outlet to compete with AL.com. And I was pretty much done I did everything I could do for Lee, got him with Premiere. And once Premiere picks up the show, Premiere is the network that functions with iHeart. So Premiere owned Rush Limbaugh, Premiere owned Glenn Beck, Premiere owned Jim Rome, Premiere owns Delilah, Premiere owns, Sean Hannity. And so
There's
they
not
own those
much
big
you can
shows,
do.
and then they put it on the iHeart stations. And so my job was growing the show, and as big as you can grow it is to get it to iHeart, and then they grow it, right? And so I'd done what I could do, and this idea is like, the timing was perfect. Like God was all over this. I just prayed, how can I use my abilities to do this in Alabama? And then the president of the Policy Institute calls me and we're like, hey, you know, it's like, whoa. And so I wrote out a mission, vision, plan, and a budget for what we're all doing right now, and got to work. And that the idea was about February 2021. We started July 2021, and we began publishing in October of 2021. And the goal was to get up and running and be firing on at least 7 of 8 cylinders, hopefully 8 by the legislative session, the elections with the quadrennium and stuff. We did that. I was really proud of the way that we handled all that. Really made a name for ourselves. And I never thought in a million years we would have established our brand and our names into the hearts of Alabamians the way that we have in such a short time.
That's quickly.
Unbelievable.
And I'll just go ahead and tell you, because I know we do have to wrap up, but I've had 2 people in the last few days say, and one knew my connection, the other one didn't, but just in conversation say, well, I was reading 1819 News. Or I saw this in 1819 News. Hey, I get the daily so-and-so from 1819 News. And I was like, very, very good. I mean, it's becoming very common.
Yeah.
And I think it's actually going through an exponential growth right now just because word of mouth is starting to get it out there. And I throw people I'm telling them, hey, look, if you want to get the news, find out what's happening in Alabama, straight up, unbiased, you need to go to 1819 News. And people are saying it just out of the clear blue sky.
Well, while we're here, before we have to go, will you tell the story of how we got this podcast?
Stories.
One more story.
She was that little kid, wasn't she? Please,
was.
tell me another story, please.
So
No, I just think I don't know if we've ever told the story of how. I mean, it's not really much of a story.
But it's interesting, and here we are, so it's worth telling.
Okay.
So I had gotten an email saying that Amy Beth wanted to use our podcast studio with this lady named Allison, and I'm like, I mean, I guess that's fine, whatever. And I'd been told, I forget, maybe Caleb or someone said, hey, you need to meet Allison. She's got this local group that's doing really cool work, getting, people involved and running for office and blah, blah, blah. And so that same, I got the email and I saw Allison's name, got the text message from Caleb saying Allison's name. And I'm like, I guess I need to call Allison. And so I called Allison, and she was walking up a hill, which is every time I call, which is every time I call Allison, she's walking up a hill.
No, it's so sad because it was a flat road right outside of my house.
I thought it was Mount Everest, but
Nope.
I'm walking.
It was so flat. I remember where I was.
Walked across the street to get the mail.
Nope. No Everest.
She wanted to tell the story.
Yeah, so
sorry, I earned it.
And and I'm like, hey, I heard you're having an event or whatever. Can I come speak at the event? Tim James was doing a thing, and so I come up here or come up to wherever it was at some country club somewhere, and Tim James spoke. Who was the lady on the marijuana that spoke? Christine Carr. Christine Carr spoke, and then I got up and kind of gave my little thing, and then Allison came over and started talking to me about the podcast. I'm like, yeah, I got the email about you and Amy Beth wanting to possibly do a podcast, and I'm like, I think that would be fabulous, right? And so the crux of it is that one of the things that Lee taught me in my learning about media, the biggest hit that radio has taken, other than Rush Limbaugh dying, is when Dr. Laura went away. Right. Okay. And so Dr. Laura, her audience, was women, right? And women, stay-at-home moms specifically. And the audience, the biggest media audience I think that there ever has been, is Oprah's audience. And Oprah's audience is stay-at-home conservative women, right?
Really?
Yeah.
That's Oprah's
how she made.
Well, it was. Think back in the day.
Yeah, before she endorsed Barack Obama, that was her.
Okay.
Seriously, and that was the downfall of her career is when she endorsed Barack Obama, and then because she chose the. Anyway, you can kind of see.
She didn't really know her audience.
Because it was all, women power. You get a car, you get a car, everybody gets a car, women power. And that was her whole show. And then when it came time to endorse Hillary or Barack, she went with Barack. Yeah. And they're like, I thought it was woman power. What happened here? I guess it's black power.
Right.
And she lost a whole bunch of.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that was a story.
Yes. So anyway.
So that's the segment that's missing.
Yeah. Is that there's no one that is speaking. And if you look across the landscape, who are the people that are most.
We asked you on your scar. I'm sorry.
I'll get there. So, but
I think we're done.
You can create content that hits that audience as well as a broader audience, but no one was directly hitting that audience really. And if you look out across the political landscape, for better or for worse, the people who are most involved in politics right now are moms You know, a lot of stay-at-home moms and
they're the
women
ones helping
and moms,
save the country. They're
it's
fighting
them,
the fight
and
at the
it's
school
a
boards.
bunch of Deborahs right now, because right now going with Barack Obama is a bunch of Baracks. And, you know, that story in the Bible is Barack's like, I'm scared, I don't want to go. And she's like, if I go with you, will you go? No, I'm scared. And then so because Barack wasn't supposed to or was scared to, Deborah goes and does, right? And she's honored for it. And so I would love to see more men stepping up. And I think that's starting to happen. And that's a big part of what my podcast is about. But I'm super thankful for the women that are stepping up, and I want to make sure that they've got information that they need, and they have content that entertains, engages, you know, teaches them the things that they need to know so that they can go out and be active and participate in their civic duty. So that was my thought when she brought me this, is all that, those things just started going off. And I'd met Amy Beth before and how talented and incredible she is. Obviously got to see Allison speak that night. Wow.
Right. And
they said, well, we need someone. And it's funny, we need like a Chris Fowler. And I'm like, I was like, Chris Fowler. And I had to like go Google Chris Fowler because I didn't know who Chris Fowler was.
No idea.
No clue.
You were in prison though.
Yeah, it's true. There was a lot of Chris Fowler in there.
You didn't get to watch Game Day.
Right.
That's right. So, but what she was basically saying is like, it would be really good to have like a male presence in there that could be somewhat of a mediator or something. And you were the first person that came to mind. I was like,
and you and I had talked before.
Yeah.
Which was weird.
Yeah. And so I'm like, I think he's not Chris Fowler, but I think you guys would complement each other really, really well. We went and met for the first time in the conference room, if you guys remember that. And we basically should have recorded that. Because we basically just had a podcast and we were in there for like 2 hours. And I knew at the end of that, I'm like, this is going to be great.
Although I was still not sure how Scott felt about us.
Why?
I don't
you always
know.
Bring that up.
I know. Well, because I couldn't get a read on you, and I was like, oh my gosh, he's gonna be miserable. But then one time you admitted that you liked us way more than you thought you would, and I knew we were gonna be okay.
From there.
Yeah, it's like all good.
And I'll tell you, because there's been so many efforts through the years. Somebody will come along and bring something, and it's just not real. It's not genuine. It's. Hey, we want to get in front of this curve. We want to get in front of all this conservatism stuff. It sounds all good, but it's not people who really believe in it.
Right.
And the difference
like our legislators.
with what we have on this podcast and with you and with the effort it's genuine. We're really trying to tell people the truth, ask people to think, bring things before folks and say, look, this is what's really happening. What do you how do we fix it? How do we move ahead? And I just thought kind of early on, okay, great. We've been through this before. It's going to be pointy headed and gracious, but everybody is,
I don't know what that means.
Is the real deal.
I mean,
pointy headed's kind of Karen and Kyle-esque. You know what I'm talking about?
I went to Coneheads,
we just want to do something. They're just not real.
Yeah.
And they say the right things, but when push comes to shove, they don't actually believe it. They just know I'm supposed to say this because I think that's what the people want to hear.
Especially every 4 years.
And yes.
Yeah.
Well, and I think part of why this works is because we actually do hash out and have sincere conversation. Like I will bounce things off of you in real time, and we can kind of talk about it and be open and honest that we don't have all the answers.
Right. And and try to bring people in who might or who would have a different experience.
Or just
even people from prison.
Yeah. Crazy
gracious. Don't let anybody on this show.
Okay, I have to say one more thing. Okay. One more story. My favorite part.
This
is
2 episodes.
How long is it?
You don't want to know. Keep going.
Are you serious?
We're not in Greg Phillips land yet, so we're still good.
Well, with your mom.
Yes. Oh, thank you.
I knew it. Thank you. That's my favorite.
All right. So many cool stories. So my mom about 3 or 4 years ago got saved.
Awesome.
She's doing incredibly well. She lives with us. She gets to be me, mom to the kids. And she's basically gotten a whole nother lease on life essentially. And so it's really cool because, she went through a lot, and, sometimes when I've shared my testimony, I've kind of given more details and less, but she went through a lot as a child, has gone through a lot as an adult. And was not in a good place mentally, emotionally, and what God's done in her life has really been amazing. And so for her to be able to live with me, and then not only live with me, but also be me mom to the kids, and my kids just love her unconditionally. They that is their favorite person. And I got a bunch of kids.
So sweet.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. It's like
thank you for saying that.
Good deal.
Just redemption. Like I don't care where you are in life. God can redeem it. You're never too far. I actually teared up at one point when, I don't know if you saw it, but I sucked it back in.
There you go.
Like, it's just, I don't know. It's a good reminder. I think if you had been born way back, you would be in the Bible. I don't know
That's
if that's
pretty
good
good
or bad.
Yeah, that is pretty high praises.
such a
I'm blushing out of
good-
my beard again.
Yeah.
Hey,
I'm not
we
good at that
appreciate
one.
y'all watching. Bryan Dawson has been our guest. He's been fantastic. It's a great story. We'll have him back another time to really talk about what the goals and the efforts behind 1819 News are. We appreciate you being on, Bryan, and giving us your testimony, really. Absolutely. Fantastic. Don't forget to go to all the places you watch or listen to podcasts, whether it's over at Apple or Spotify or what did you say you added?
Podbean. We are on Podbean.
Did you get us
Podbean.
added
You
to
don't
that?
go to Podbean, though.
It's a
don't do
little
that?
app.
No, you go to
can do it.
Podbean and Buzzsprout feed to Apple Podcasts.
You can't listen to it
Well,
over
you
there?
can, but nobody
Yeah.
does.
I
The
do.
very technologically
Weirdos.
savvy people.
I have
do.
an app.
So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, but YouTube does not like YouTube or Amy Beth. So you see what
So
I did
we're on
there?
a
So
live
that was
stream.
good. We're
Yeah,
going to
so,
Rumble.
So we rumble with Alabama Unfiltered. So you guys have an unhealthy relationship
I
with
think
the
it's a
YouTubes.
badge of honor.
I would be sad
I like
if we
it.
weren't in trouble with
Yeah, no,
YouTube.
I'm super. I don't know how I
Why
have
do you
it.
not get kicked off?
I don't know, but I'm
Because
just
you're
gonna
not as
ride it out.
conservative as we are.
Apparently, they feel bad for me because I'm a felon.
That's what got you in. They're like,
Yeah.
he's got to be good. He was in
yeah.
prison.
Yeah.
I don't know. I challenge you
Must be
to
one of
get
our
kicked
guys.
off, Bryan Dawson.
I mean,
something.
today might do it. I don't know. We recorded earlier, so.
Ooh.
We'll see. But thank y'all for watching. We appreciate it, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon. See y'all.